U.S. Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg made a stop in South Florida, joining Miami-Dade Mayor Daniela Levine Cava at Port Miami. I got the chance to sit down with him to discuss not only the infrastructure law and South Florida transit, but also the Israel-Hamas war. Mr. Secretary, welcome to Miami. It's good to see you again.
It's great to be back.
So, of course, we're here at Port Miami, one of the largest passenger ports in the world, one of the largest cargo in the country. But before we talk about that, I do want to address the Israeli-Hamas war right now. Is there any credible threat right now to any of the transportation facilities in this country?
Well, we have excellent security provided by the Department of Homeland Security, and we partner with them as a department to make sure that all of our facilities, whether it's airports, whether it's ports, are safe and secure. A lot of work goes into that, and of course, a lot of vigilance goes into that, especially when world events increase the temperature.
So, because of what's happening in the Middle East, is there an intensification of security here in the States?
Well, we're always looking at conditions. If there's anything that needs to be made public for heightened awareness, that would come from the Department of Homeland Security. But right now, if you don't hear about a need for any changes or a specific threat, that means that conditions are steady. And that's, for the most part, what we have seen on the U.S. side. But again, every day, every hour, closely monitoring conditions so people can get the best information. I can tell you, having flown in, flown out, I feel safe, and we're working to make sure it stays that way for all travelers.
And what about getting Americans out of Israel? Because I know that Governor DeSantis signed an executive order that has helped Floridians get back home. What is the federal government doing?
That's right. We work to permit those flights, and the State Department has arranged charters and even cruise ships to help. I do want to emphasize that there are still a lot of commercial options. I just checked yesterday. There are seats on the next flight from Tel Aviv to Miami. So there are options, both commercial options through regular airlines and some of these supplemental options like charters that have been organized, whether by the state, by the U.S. State Department, or other parties.
Okay, so let's talk about why you're here. But before, you rode the Brightline. How did it go?
You know, it was a great experience. We believe that Americans should have the best train service, but for too long, really for my whole lifetime, that hasn't always been the case. A level of reliability, speed, and service that people in many other countries can take for granted just has not been prioritized in the U.S. We're changing that, and it's really exciting to see a private player like Brightline mobilizing a lot of private capital to get that done. We've contributed too in a number of ways to help improve and enhance that infrastructure. And it was great to see that Floridians are getting new options to get to where they're going. One thing I would emphasize is even if you don't use the train, you benefit when other people do, because it also means less congestion on the roads.
Absolutely. It's been 2 years since President Biden signed the infrastructure law. How can you tell us concretely how it's helped places like Port Miami?
Well, that's part of why we're here. We're highlighting an investment that is going to add more than a half mile of track to help facilitate getting containers from ships onto trains, improvements that are going to help make this a greener port, which means cleaner air. Again, even if you don't work at the port or think of yourself as a user, you're benefiting from those improvements. Those are exactly the kinds of things that motivated us to fight so hard to get this bill done in the first place. And we're really just getting warmed up when it comes to delivering these improvements. We've got grants going to make streets safer, going to multiple communities across South Florida. We're improving the airport in Fort Lauderdale, in Miami, and other airports in this region. And if you look more broadly across the state, we're doing things like adding truck parking spaces on I-4 going out toward Tampa, which is going to mean safer roads. So, whether we're talking about roads and bridges, ports and airports, trains and transit, every form of transportation is now seeing benefits thanks to the president's infrastructure plan.
So you mentioned the benefits to Miami International Airport and Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport. There have been some reports of aviation problems, including some near misses in the sky, old computer systems and technology, a shortage of air traffic controllers. So how can you assure Americans that when they fly, they're safe?
Well, we have the safest, most complex aviation system in the world. And if you think about it, it's a remarkable fact that the safest way to travel is to fly through the air, miles above the surface of the ground at nearly the speed of sound. We have gone more than a decade without without having a single fatal airliner crash, and we don't take that safety record for granted. That's why even a plane coming too close to another plane, and sometimes a half a mile is considered a close call for our purposes, gets investigated, because we're at the level where we need to maintain that. That does mean upgrading computer systems, handling increased demand, and it means the need to hire more air traffic controllers. One of many, many reasons why we cannot allow a government shutdown. And one of the things I worked to make sure we made clear when extreme Republicans took us very close to a shutdown a few weeks ago is that if that happens, that also shuts down our air traffic control training at a moment when we cannot afford to do that.
There have been passenger complaints. I think it's up 55%. And President Biden had said something. He wants to crack down on that and help consumers when they fly. What can you tell us, like examples of how that is happening?
Well, we're getting results for passengers for exactly this reason. And look, I've taken more than 600 airline flights just since getting this job, so I know firsthand the experience and sometimes the frustration that airline passengers have. We are right now undertaking the biggest expansion in passenger rights in decades in this country. I'll give you some concrete examples. A year and a half ago, none of the top 10 airlines in the United States guaranteed things like meals, hotels, or ground transportation if they were responsible for you getting stuck. Now nearly all of them do, and if they fall down on that obligation, we can enforce and hold them accountable.
Finally, I do want to ask you something that's non-transportation related, because we are here in the state of Florida. It may be something that you take personally, and that is the parental rights and education bill right now that Governor DeSantis signed into law, which essentially prohibits instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity. Your thoughts on that?
Well, this is an example of trying to score political points off of vulnerable people. We all agree that instruction ought to be age appropriate, and that's something that teachers focus on every day. And as a parent, I trust the teachers who will teach my children to do that. This is about something very different. This is about a governor, a government official, dictating to people that they can't even mention their own families in a schoolhouse. And look, we know why this is happening. This is not happening because it is the number one problem the governor was hearing about. Last time I checked, there are some real issues here on things like the affordability of insurance. And you got a governor, the top official in the state, who seems more focused on making life harder for gay families or transgender kids. That is not solving problems that Floridians need help with. We're focused on literally building bridges, and he seems to be more focused on banning books.
Thank you so much for joining us and for taking the time.
Thank you.